Hello, everybody. My name is Cindy Buxton, and I'm going to introduce our talk tonight. One of the presentations for the Armchair Traveler Series, which is a series hosted by the library on travels and journeys and adventures put on by people from Haines and our neighbors in Juneau and other surrounding areas. This is the 20th talk, I believe, in the last 4 years. And I think it's been great fun. Some of the places, sometimes we have talks that tell you about places you can go, and some like tonight are places that maybe most of us aren't going to get to, but we can see what it's like. The talk tonight is John Svenson talking about Denali. The title is The Meat Grinder Surviving Denali. Before I introduce him, I want to tell you about the upcoming talks. Next week on Wednesday, April 10th, via Zoom only, is a talk by Brian Weed from Juneau. It's called Pack Rafting the Stikine, the Border to Wrangell, 45 Miles of River, Hot Springs, and Garnets. Brian has given talks, I think 3 talks so far for our series, and he's very good at it, just like John. So it's a good one to see. The week after that, April 17th, George Fictor is going to tell us about traveling the big world with little children, about his travels years ago with his young family around the world and how to do that. And then the week after that, I think we have one more talk, but I don't have the title for you yet. If you want to give a talk sometime in the future, give me a call. We have 4 or 5 talks already set up for next year, and we have room for some more. And it's a lot of work to put on a talk sometimes, but it does give you the opportunity to organize your slides and get things in order. And we provide technical assistance if you need it. And then the library makes a nice recording, which you can share with your friends if they missed it, and maybe your kids or grandkids when they're older, if they're too young to really understand it now. Okay, so let me introduce John. But I guess first I should tell you, those of you who are at home, you can send questions via the chat window. And also at the end of the talk, you can raise your hands and ask verbal questions. But I think probably most of the questions will be at the end. So John Svenson first came to Haines in 1967 to work as an artist in training for the Alaskan Indian Arts. He grew up in California in an artist community and became a fanatical climber, and so therefore Haines was a nirvana for him. By 1969, he became officially Alaskan. This is when he met Sharon, Haines' girl itching for adventure. He was part of a northern migration of fellow rock climbers, one of which moved to Anchorage and founded My Trip, which was a concession to guide at Denali. And that's where the show begins. Here's John.
So I'd like to say first that this whole system here is new to me. I'm a slideshow guy. I've never done a virtual show. So I've got people in front of me. I'm going to talk a little bit and then turn the face aspect off on this. But and here I am now, and you're going to see me 30 years ago. That should be noted. All of this is camera shot, no digital shots in this. Back in the day of, there were no cell phones or any of that. So a lot of these are hip shots and kind of, when you're guiding, you shoot from the hip. You don't set up, the fancy photography stuff and expect to get shots that, but so everything is sort of at the moment and spontaneously recorded. So the pre-digital aspect, and I've got a few things here I want to say before we get into this thing. It was all organized for a presentation I'm doing on the cruise ships in June. And this show is a prototype for that. So it could be whittled down. I don't know what's going to happen. Like I said, it's kind of new to me. And I get a phone call. I heard a beep.
Don't worry about beeps.
And those of you in the audience, there are people in front of me here. And then I'm going to turn off the face and I'm going to keep yakking. So I don't know who's out there. The mountain, those of you that aren't familiar with Denali, there have been a number of expeditions before it's ever climbed. And one of the earliest ones is the Wickersham approach. They got to 10,000 feet at what's called the Wickersham Wall now on the north side. And I don't know what happened on that expedition. That's as far as they got. The first ascent, that was 1903. 3 when that happened. And the sourdough ascent was 10 years later, 1913 on June 7th. And they spent 3 months hauling loads into the mountain before they even got to the glacier. And those were all with dog sleds and stuff. And their tents all blew down and they dismantled their dog sled tarps and made tents and somehow miraculous way climbed this mountain. And that was totally epic. It's like this legendary thing. First winter ascent was in 1967. That was minus 138, and maybe some of you have read that book. That was epic, and that was Ray Genet was on that. And the first winter solo ascent, and it said Survivor on the descriptions. Vern Tejas did this. I think he did the Cassin Ridge, and survived somehow. And it's a survivor because another guy, Naomi Yamura, had perished on a winter ascent not long before that. And I think it was probably maybe before Vern climbed this thing. So he's the successful one. And I don't know where to go from here. I should just start showing slides because the cruise ship industry said I've got 40 minutes to do this presentation. Here I've got a little bit longer. And I don't know if they bring the hook out to yank me off the stage or what at that point. So basically this is working your way up the mountain, and the selection of slides out of thousands. And some of them are a little bit gritty because we just scanned these and they'll be cleaned up a little bit for the cruise ship deal. So here, let's start this and see what happens.
Do you want the video off?
Oh, you can turn me off. I'm still here.
Okay, so now just go up and down.
So I'm sure I'm going to get asked questions. The meat grinder, and that was one, I gave this to the cruise ship as explaining what's happening. Well, this is epics on the meat grinder. What's that? And in the climbing world, we jokingly sort of talk about Death and Woe on the Mountain. You've got the shredder, you've got all kinds of cool names. The slasher, the butcher, like these climbs are, who knows what happened on those. The meat grinder, when the people arrive in the spring, the meat's here and the grinder's running. And that was kind of this dark joke. And this is also all guiding. This is no private trips. I'm with clients on all of this. And that was my introduction to the mountain. So here we go. If I can doink, doink. Okay, forward. Hey, welcome to the digital world.
Maybe.
All of you out there in another world, I have no idea who's.
Well, I don't know why.
Uh-oh. So as we're figuring this out, the oldest person to climb Denali in 1978 was 78 years old. And the oldest I personally guided was over 60, which is pretty good. I mean, you're 78, I'm 75, and I think about myself up there now, and I could probably do it, but I have to pretty crank on the, Thor's gym to, put myself into shape for something like that. So, oh, here we are. So, okay, so this is,
Down.
this kind of shows the mountain in general, and you're looking at 12,000 feet is your second camp. 8,000 is at the bottom. 12,000 is at 12,000 feet, and then you've got the 14,000 foot camp, which is usually takes at least 6 days to get to that level with clients because you're hauling a load, coming back, and then moving camp, and then you're hauling a load, moving back, and moving the camp up. And we're not going to go above that right now. To 24 or that's 14,002 is the sort of the break-in period. And am I going forward? No, I'm going backwards. Oh, there we are. So, and as a guide, this is packing for a 3-week expedition and 21 days worth of food for 21, 3 weeks. And then we've got 10 people on this. So it's massive. And I didn't just fall into this Denali thing. There's a sort of a process how it happens. You don't just suddenly come to Alaska and be a Denali guide. There's a lot of, that introduction was, a lot's missing in there. So the food, and that's forward. Maybe I'm going backwards. Aha. So here we are packed into the airplane. And when I first climbed this, there weren't too many guide services on the mountain. And there was Genet, Fantasy Ridge, Mountain Travel, Mountain Trip, RMI was there, Knowles. And those are about the only concessions happening. And it all involves packing this masses of stuff into airplanes, which is sort of worth your money in the end. Am I going forward? There we go. It's a
pilot. Was Lowell Thomas Jr. your pilot?
No, we had Doug Geeding, we had Lowell Thomas Jr. was a pilot, Cliff Hudson when we first flew in. Sheldon, at my time of the guiding, had sort of retired from that. Tuckheaton Air Service, K2 Aviation, Jim Machinick. It was like a family. There's still a dirt runway in front of the Fairview Inn, which is inconceivable. But it's about 45 minutes into the mountain, and you're flying over. How I looked at this was like 45 minutes of potential crash sites, because you're flying over this, I mean, pretty much the middle of nowhere. Here comes one of the pilots landing. We're landing about 7,000 feet on the Kahiltna Glacier. This is Kahiltna Base. Everything I'm doing is on the west buttress, and which is sort of the gravy train cattle prodding epic that it's turned into. And that's another whole story. This was one of the planes where you can see the skis and climbers off to the left and landing at Denali in the back. That's this mountain up in the back is Denali. And the total, we're landing at 7,000 feet and the summit's, over 20,000 feet. So that's quite a rise in elevation. And I don't know, 10, 15 miles of walking. We're unpacking plane. You can see the crates and stuff. And when the season begins, there's like it's incredible. The plane's flying in and out. And now, and I could get into that. When I first climbed the mountain in 1980, one client in May and nobody else was on the mountain. When I stopped, 91 was my last trip, there were 500 people on the mountain. And it was appalling, but kind of cool at the same time. Getting out of the way of the plane when the prop's running is a really good idea. Planes sink. I mean, this is the snow has to be. These glacier pilots are magical to me. They just have this so wired. Drake, anybody that's flown with Drake or Paul knows that. You have to know a lot of stuff. The snow conditions, in this case, the ski went down and gas was pouring out of the wing. So we had to plug up the hole in the wing and jack this thing back up and stomp out a runway with snowshoes. In this incident too, the pilot spent the night in his pilot seat. Okay, Hilton Base. And this is, I don't know, we're looking at 15 trips glommed together. So none of these are consistent, the same trip. And this looks like a pretty mellow Kahiltna Base right here. And looking at Mount Hunter in the back, and Denali would be off to the left. Kahiltna Base with its forest. And there's always a camp manager, and they were in communication with the flight services in Talkeetna. And this was back in the day with CBs. There were no cell phones. The only reception we had from outside was AM radio from Anchorage on little radios. It was a little different then. So everything, the contact and all of that was, in that respect in itself, it was more of an adventure. Cell phones now, holy cow, just unbelievable. But see that the forest, all the climbers that fly in either bring 6 packs of beer and stash them for the return, and then the forest came in for the benefit of the camp manager, which is really cool. And there'd be an evening call. I forget what time it was, what morning and an evening, like maybe 9 o'clock, and where everybody's on their CBs, kind of keeping up on what's going on the mountain. So here's, I don't know if this shows this really well. We can see on the middle left, that's the outhouse. And so that was kind of staked out. So privacy is, that's okay. I think actually the females were able to dig a pit, it's where they could kind of hide in there. And what the coolest thing is this outhouse, I remember a Swiss Army knife falling into this hole that was really deep and sitting in this hole. Some guy down there fishing for that. That was pretty extreme. Base camp is really plush. Base camp is, Ron Rico, boy, just kind of hang out, and we would fly in and just sit and watch climbers come and go at times too. The people on the receiving end and the people, being be dragged out with purple toes. This is Sharon, my wife, and you see the speaker in there, and these tents are so plush, and base camp is really a cool place. There's more party tent. And I could get into, like I mentioned earlier, I could talk for 20 minutes on each slide because they're all incidences. This is a Willens box designed for climbing in Patagonia by Don Willens a long time ago. And it's not aerodynamic, but you could not crush it. And the winds really couldn't blow it over. This is an epic piece of equipment. And no mosquito nets or anything, strictly survival. On Everest, they left these open on one of the expeditions. Everest came back a year later and the things are still standing, but it was full of ice and snow. And if any climbers are out there listening to this, you know, of course you can't correct me on this, but I'm close to the truth. And I'll admit that because we spent a lot of time in that tent partying mostly. Food at base camp, Ernie Bourgeon, he was one of the early guides, one of our group. And base camp, we've got halibut and bagels. You could really, live it up. And the whole idea is to show these people, keep them comfortable as long as you can. The pain is coming, so be really easy on everybody. So base camp is paradise. This is our early group. I think it was 1984. And Nick Parker on the left, Gary Bocard, who this is his company, Mountain Trip, and then me on the right. And this was you get all kinds of the silver anniversary of climbing the mountain, and that's another whole epic that could get into. But we're sort of these were like these wildy suits just came out too. The zoot suits that we're wearing, oh man, the best. And so the happy day in base camp, getting ready for stuff, gearing up. Generally, this is a little higher up the mountain because we don't have snowshoes on here. We could be at 12,000 feet here. Normally, you start with snowshoes or skis and to a certain level and then put on crampons. But you can see the ropes and the sleds. And there's a whole theory behind putting these systems together. And I could get into this too, but there's always a young buck in a guiding situation. You have a team of 8. There's two or three young bucks. Boy, they're ready to go. And you got 2 or 3 grandpa, they'd call him, like 45, 50. And the trick was the young bucks are like rabbits. They just, and the old guys are like the tortoise. So you load the young guys up with a lot of weight and then lighten up the old guys and sort of even it out that way. Inevitably, when we hit altitude, 14,000 above, the young bucks are the ones that burn out and the old guys kick into gear because they know their pace. And then they're dragging these 25-year-olds. And that was always fun to see. And then he wasn't grandpa anymore. It was Jay. This is like one day out of base camp. And we started sort of up around the corner on the right. And you can see that's a pretty well punched trail. And we are roped. It's critical. Whoop. Ah. This is where scale kicks in too. Like people fly into this and they work out in the gym and they prepare themselves. And then you land in a place like this and oh my God, you look up and it's insane. You're nothing up there. And, you're on the mountain with a group of people, but when the storms hit, you're really alone. This is a pretty typical, you kind of get used to this. And you can see the willow wand behind him on the trail marked with we used to call them willow wands. I don't know, green garden stakes now. This is a day out of base camp. And this goes on, you can see a crevasse, or is that? No, that's looks like a tent site on the lower right. But this goes on for the first carry to Camp 1, basically. You're gaining 1,000 feet, and it's a long haul, fairly long, really cool. And also, low on the mountain, you're in t-shirts and shorts. You're doing this, even though it's crevasse-free, you're still roped and geared up, but you're sweltering. On the Juneau ice fields here, we wear bed sheets like Arabs without head holes cut in them, and just bed sheets because it gets so darn hot up there. Another heat. And this is, I call this the gravy train because there are private expeditions on the mountain too. Like Europeans have come over, we got 14 days, we're going to summit. And evidently they send, they go up so fast they get sick and they never make it, or something happens, get stormbound, and these people on time limits. Whereas hey, hi everyone, Bill. What's our willow, Bill? What are willow wands? Give me a break. You use those on the Juneau ice fields. Yeah, green garden stakes at any garden supply. Ha ha. So that's pretty cool. So they're on skis. This goes on for quite a ways. Camp 1, this is about 8,000 feet. And in this case, it looks like it actually went off the main trail and camped off to the side. But it's so cool. And this is where, if you're not tough, you get tough. Willow wands are used to mark the trail in the case of a whiteout. Hey, excellent. Thank you. Yeah, take that, Bill. That's great. So here we are hauling loads again. This is above that 8,000-foot camp. And you're pretty casual, you're just trudging along, but there's cracks in here that could swallow this building. It's terrifying. We'll get into that later. The grinder part, but working our way up now. The cook pit. And my wife, Sharon, she was on one of these expeditions and one of her buddies from Juneau and had a great time putting the men to shame. You got these tough chicks and you got these guys that come up and like, oh, give me a break. They just aren't Alaskan enough. And so you got to kind of hold the women back to not make the guys look inferior. And plus they're in charge of the cook pit. So that's a very important position, very important. There's always one guy on this expedition, commercial or generally, who wants to be a guide. And that's the kid you sick on, the client that's given us the most trouble, the troublesome trekker. If he does a good job with that guy, not letting him know that he's being watched, so I can do other stuff, he gets to work in the cook pit. And that's where the first hot water and the first food is. It's pretty darn cool, an honorable position. More cook pit. You can see how we dig the wind walls and he's got no shirt on. This is 12,000 feet. Probably, well, it could be a little lower, but pretty darn casual for the most part. It's the grunt. I sort of divided this into trudges. There's 3 levels to the lower trudge, the middle trudge, and then the grunt is where you leave the sleds behind and you're on all fours for some of it. And so at this point, you can see the mountains in cloud. Whoever's up there this evening is having probably a heck of a time. And I'm going to move away from, where you can't see me, the left edge of the cloud where it hits the left shoulder is 17,000 feet. So you can look up and see what's going on up there. And the guys that are on top now, when this picture was taken, we're going to see them tomorrow because coming down, it's lickety split. I mean, you're 18 hours from this point. You just go like a bat out of hell downhill. It took them, over 2 weeks to get up there. So you find out whoever's been massacred on the top, you're going to see that later. And that's really good for the clients because they're seeing the results of who comes off this mountain. It's no joke. And they see it well before they're high enough to have that happen to them. Storms. At this phase 2, we're moving no matter what the weather because the trail is pretty well established and the other people are moving also. So the bad weather, you just put on your packs and trudge and until it becomes unreasonable. And usually in a guiding sense too, we had our people on snowshoes and not skis. I did one trip guiding with skis and talk about hell all over. And these guys on skis dragging sleds down slopes and it was horrible. Usually the sled was in front of the skis, then you get tangled in it and fall over, but I don't know. It's fast downhill with skis for sure. Here's a modest load. I think this is Vern Tejas, the guy I mentioned that did the winter ascent, the solo winter ascent, a tough sucker. That's another whole story. And we were all kind of guiding together on this. All of us, I was mountain travel, mountain trip, and we were guiding next to Knowles and Fantasy Ridge and these guys. So we're leapfrogging loads together in these camps, and it became like this massive family on the mountain. And as time went by, a decade later, it kind of got beyond family, and you didn't want to be near anybody in the beginning. You wanted to kind of glom in and support each other. But Vern, this guy was an ox, definitely. Here's a moving day on the glacier. And a lot of this, when it's doing this down low, doesn't mean it's bad up high. We could be in the clouds up high. It could be spectacular. So it's day by day what's happening. You meet people on the trail, and I don't know who these are. This is their girl group, and you can see their harnesses and how they're rigged up. Everybody's rigged up for anticipating falling into a bottomless pit. And how do you get people out of that thing? And looking at their tie-up system is got short rope tied up and got the prusik knots and everything. So they didn't fall into a pit. These two didn't, but they're ready for it. And also the people we're guiding see this. I mean, I can lecture my head off, but when it happens, they're seeing other people already about what I was talking about. And so everybody's learning from this, which is incredible. In fact, I would recommend if anybody wanted to, Susan Butcher, this was mid 80s. She was the first woman to dog sled to the summit, and talk about a tough chick. I mean, we could hear her coming a mile away screaming at her dogs. And our snowshoes were packed with dog poop. I mean, those dogs would just spew poop. And we're walking through this with snowshoes, and the Park Service finally said, come on, go off the trail and do that. And I think she carried her dogs basically to the summit, because you'll see on the fixed lines, you're not dragging a sled up that high. But she was someone to meet, and she'd already become Susan Butcher, quite the person. Susan Butcher's on the mountain. Wow, that's way cool. But that dog poop was, man, that was an eye opener. We told her she should start making stew out of it. Make use of that stuff. But, this Norma Jean Green, who was the first female to solo the mountain, and she lived in Palmer, and she was on the mountain a lot and co-guided with us, and did the step ladder, so she fell into a crack, it would span the ladder and she could crawl out. And that was really cool. And all of us were supporting Norma Jean because she was working her way up with us. And you get to a certain altitude, you don't need the ladder, you're above the crevasse zone. But that was kind of cool to see. And the clients are seeing this too. And this is something I don't even anticipate. So it just happens. A lot of this whole thing is just, at the beginning, you explain where we're going and what we're going to do. And then the climb is when you're on it, is where everything comes to light. Because like I said, I didn't know we were going to run into Norma Jean. She was on the mountain. And there she is. And the clients go, oh my God, there she is. Like Susan Butcher. Never met Susan Butcher. Now's your chance. Here we are getting deeper snow. I'm not sure what the heck we're doing here. The mountain got to the point, this is like my 6th or 8th ascent, I forget. I was so appalled and pissed off at the crowds. I went back to, we did 2 trips back to back. I made road signs for the mountain, and like these signs, and stuck them on the trail, because there's a lot of kind of idiots up there too. They're smart, maybe they're doctors down here, but they're like 3-year-olds when they're on the mountain. So you have to kind of guide them. The thing, and the Park Service really got it. I didn't make them green and white because I knew the Park Service would, that's going a little bit too far. So I posted the whole mountain, and that was another whole story. My people loved it. And that's Squirrel Hill. So we're approaching the 12,000 foot base, and we're at 10,000 feet here. And as you can see, you're not getting lost really easy. One storm comes in and that trail's gone. And you're getting into 12,000 feet and getting above that lower cloud layer is pretty spectacular. It's also dropping in temperature. Night carries down low. It's so hot in the daytime, it was horrible. So we do at night, you haul at night and sleep all day in the sweltering tents. That was really a good experience because the snow is firmed up, and this is 2 a.m. So it's at this time of May and June, the sun really doesn't set. On the mountain, it doesn't set. You're pretty much looking at, the brilliant horizon line. Crashing on the glacier, why pitch the tents? You just lay out your sleeping bags on a pad and sleep, when you needed that rest. And so here we are, passed out. You don't sleep, you pass out there. So it's a good weight loss program. This whole thing is endurance test. What can someone take? How much can they haul? How long can they take it? It's an endurance test. And you have this, get into the dynamics of a guided group. Nobody wants to look like the weakling. So everybody's like, oh, but you can analyze like, man, this guy's dying, but he's looking really buff and tough. And like, it's a psychological extravaganza, really dealing with groups. And I don't know. I'm glad I'm not doing it anymore. Let's come back exhausted. Here we are. This is the 14,000 foot basin, I think, or this 12,000 feet. I kind of get these mixed up. Another sunny day, beautiful day. These are all customers we're looking at too. I make that, they're all dazed and confused and catching on. Oops, a little off the frame, but this is an April ascent at 12,000 feet. And that's, I think more climbers are going up in April now because May and June are, it's a trophy peak and there's so many people on it. And it's Windy Corner around the right side, which was the first really weird thing that you do. This is 12,000 feet. You can see again, we're above the clouds. Here's Windy Corner. That's Sharon, my wife, coming around Windy Corner. And this is the first place where we're not on snowshoes or skis, we're on crampons. And you don't want to slide off to the left because it's quite a drop. And if you were a geek totally out of control, you could slide a long ways. And I've been told now this last few years, Windy Corner's turned into like an ice slick because everything's kind of changed since this was 30 years ago. Everything's changed. And boy, you took a tumble on it now. And I don't know if they put ice screws and hand lines. Do you know that? Have you been on the mountain? No, on the right. You're a climber. I know you. Well, no, you should have been there. Yeah, the climber look, like who knows who's been around Windy Corner, most of you folks. But this is epic right here. And when you're escaping, if you're all beat up and having a hard time, this is the first place you kind of need to, the last place you really need to watch it. Coming into 14,000 feet. Windy Corner's on the lower left. And this is where the medics camp is. And in the beginning, it was just one weather port with one solar panel. It kind of grew into this, boy, you want to go in and check everything on you. This is the place. You can, there are all these guys just sitting there waiting for victims, basically. And if you have a client that's, this really became common. You got this guy on the trip that's having a really hard time and you know that maybe not make it, but I can't tell him he has to stop. The medics have to tell him because I'm just a guide. So you kind of suggest, we're going to talk to the doctors, and the doctor will say, nah, I don't think you should go up there. Then you're cool. I don't do that because they paid all this money and they're going to go to the top and they don't care how they feel at the time. And so this is invaluable. The medics camp is, a pretty cool place. And now they're testing everybody. It's actually like almost a research station now. You can go in anytime, check your blood pressure or anything, and they'll do it. And it's also, I get into this, we're just putting up the cook tent in the medical station. Pretty plush. More medical stuff, the oxygen bottles. They had a hyperbaric chamber there where you could get in this thing, they blow up and it takes you back down in air pressure. That was really cool. Sit in this thing and like, oh, I'll take you back down to 7,000 feet. Oh, wow, air. And let you realize how much less air there is up there. And so you kind of play with that on the days off. And the medics had a great time because they were just checking victims, basically. Here's 14,000. And there's tales of 14,000. And those of you out of the netherworld that might be watching this, if you were up there, you remember when the Japanese, the storm comes in, there's a hair wash. That's getting a little bit out of sequence. This is 14,000 feet. The big storm came in, we're all in our tents, and storm ends, and all of us are digging out, and we look over there where the Japanese tent was, there's a bump. And sure enough, dig them out, the two guys, dead as doornails, laying next to their stoves with burnt out stove with almost smiles on their faces, asphyxiated, just like that. And and they were, when we came by, were they in bags next to the medic's tent, ready to be excavated, basically. But so here we are watching Sharon doing hair washes at 14,000 feet. That's pretty cool. Street dances at 14,000 feet. This is the last place where you can kind of party and pretend like you're not going to have a hard time with what's next. So the reunions, like this is also a gathering place for people coming off the mountain because you're getting a firsthand report on this guy with purple toes or like suffering. This is where you meet the people that are suffering, and the clients do too. And that's really important because they go up from here and it gets pretty darn serious. Yeah, back in the old days of Walkmans and cassette tapes, and this is so ancient. It's pretty incredible. But and you put these speakers, I bet they were like four D-size batteries, big old things that weigh 10 pounds each, and that's what you put on the young guys' sleds. They can drag that stuff up there. Yeah, more of that. 14,000 feet. It's a nice day. Here comes the storm. And this is, like I mentioned, these guys being buried alive. Well, uh, we're all, you learn that from those guys taught all of us to, boy, that shovel, have that shovel ready and don't go to sleep next to your stoves during a snowstorm. Michael Covington used Fantasy Ridge at the time, and he's one of the guys that we were guiding alongside of. But the storm comes in, starts snowing, and keeping track of, I think of Haynes in the spring as the snow melts. There's the rakes and shovels that you lost in the fall, starts poking out. It's the same thing. You lose something out here, and they're like cash is lost, and you can't find them again. So it's something to be aware of. The cook pit, the guides, clients are in their tents, and we're cooking outside. It's another thing that happens. They're not paying for that. A tent. It's pretty mellow here, really. The wind walls were pretty significant wind walls here too, because it could blow like hell. Here's the guide's job. They're all tucked away, waiting for water, the evening's water, and we're just melting snow and making water. And that's what they're paying for. I mean, they're not supposed to be up there doing this, except for that young wannabe guide. Get him out there with a shovel and start digging and see what guiding really is. Shoveling. We would get completely dressed. And there's no darkness, so there's really no night, but like 2 a.m. or something, and put on your zoot suit and go out and shovel it all hours. If it needs it, and you're not shoveling your tent, you're shoveling your row of tents. And sometimes you can pitch in, and the next camp is being buried faster than ours. And it's like I said, that guiding family, you become pretty familiar with your friends on the mountain. There's a windstorm moving into 14,000. Another storm kind of moving in. And a clear day. So it clears up, and then, well, what's that all about? It begins as fast as it ends. Like the storm can move in, and then within hours it could break, and leave you like this. So up high, you're kind of ready to bolt. When the weather's good, you move, and when it's bad, you hunker down. These are the bag heads. We had 3 of the same bags on the mountains. We got together and paid homage to the upper mountain in hopes that we'd make it. At the last ceremony, the serious ceremony. So now we're at 14,200, and the next series goes to 16,200, the next camp, 17,000, then 18,000 is at Denali Pass, and we've camped there once, and it's a wind tunnel, and the weather was good, but it's a horrible place to get caught. And then, of course, the summit. And then there's the Valley of Death down below, where you can see, obviously, everything funnels into that area, the West Rib and the Cassine Ridge. And I think what I mentioned Vern Tejas during the first winter ascent solo, did the Cassine Ridge. And it's my understanding, any of you out there in the virtual world, he wore bunny boots on that whole thing, which is unbelievable. This guy was pretty darn tough. So we're going to go up the fixed lines. There's 14,000 feet. This is probably mid 80s, just judging. I can't tell what month it really is anymore, but what year, by how many people are actually there. And this is kind of like the Hillary step on Everest. I don't know if you've kept up with the Everest, the shots of the summit and going to the South Col, where it's like the Chilkoot Trail. Absolutely. You don't step out of line. You just keep going. And the fixed lines can get like that. And the camping areas on the top are somewhat limited. So, you're vying for, and also people coming out said, we vacated the snow cave on the left. So you can get up there quick and move into that snow cave before the next gang does. There's fixed lines from previous summers, and the Park Service now puts up the fixed line on this, and they go up early and they do this just for safety's sake. And you can see these are melted in, pretty crazy. But, so there's actually snow accumulation there. There's the fixed line. So the next camp is where they top out, and off to the right is 16,200. And a lot of people now are going for 17 in one fell swoop. And we never did that, because usually you pull into 14,000, you're kind of pukey, and can you hang out there a day? 17,000, you're also kind of pukier, maybe, hang out for a day. If you go straight to 17, where 16,000 gives you that extra day to acclimatize. And we're also not ferrying loads. This is like one fell swoop, it all goes up. And so you see this happening, and okay, where are those guys going? And here's the fixed lines. It's not dangerous so much as you don't want to unclip and go start rolling, because you definitely go a ways. Fixed lines. But this is actually this is the first real climbing that people do on the mountain. You're really using an ice axe seriously, and no ski poles. The fixed lines. And I forget what this is, 700, 800 feet maybe of this. See, he's got pretty good steps in there right now. And it is a quick transition. These people going up now are going to summit tomorrow or the next day, and they'll be out of there. So you got them coming down at the same time. But that transition's pretty darn quick. And this is the top of the fixed lines. And camp, and you see the guy in the back is at the top of the fixed lines. And this is one situation we camped on the right side and tucked ourselves in behind these rocks, because the wind can howl through here. There's such a thing as a lee side to the mountain when you get to this point. The wind, you can just duck over the edge and it's dead calm, and on one side you're being blown off the mountain. This is also where this has happened, where someone has to pee, puts his booties on, steps out, and he's gone. And you go a long ways, and tents are blown off over this edge, and you really have to be aware of like roped up, because there have been quite a few incidences where people have fallen off around this point. Here's another, you're on the edge here. See how packed in we tend to be. This is a nice camp. So yeah, the top of the fixed lines are over 16,000 feet. Views get good. I mean, just looking down into, that's moose country down there. And so you're way the heck up there looking down at this green thing. So it's kind of like a torture in a way. Whereas they're looking up at the mountain going, man, I'm glad I'm not up there. So it's a two-way thing. So beyond the fixed lines, you hit probably, you're still roped and not dangerous, but if you're kind of clumsy and trip over your crampons, you could go sliding. And we're not actually belaying on a lot of this, but we're moving along together and get into this area where people can perish, and they have. The famous Washburn Boulder, you go up and around to the left of that, then you're heading for 17,200. And you could fall off. This is looking from 17 down at that same boulder. And you definitely don't want to go flying off over the edge. And there's, in the death and woe part of this mountain, Vern was the first, in the description, the first surviving person to solo it in the winter. Naomi Imura, who skied Mount Everest, maybe you've heard him he's the first man to ski Mount Everest, which was a tragedy. He didn't die, but it was ridiculous. He forgot there's no air at 25,000 feet, so the chute wouldn't deploy. I mean, that kind of thinking ahead. But he disappeared on this stretch. They don't know if his cave was at 17,000, but they never found him again. So they think he might have made it because this cave was there, but they never found him. And it's anticipated this guy fell off here. That's where he tripped over his crampons and never found him. So the clients all know that too. You kind of hit them with this, like, yeah, he's down there somewhere. Coming around Washburn Boulder. And by this time, you know on your team who's probably going to make it and who isn't, because you get to 17,000 and then you can see where you don't want to fall off this thing. And we started like way down to the left. This is approaching 17,000, just came across that ridge. But I don't know, you kind of have to have your wits together, I guess. By this time, you're tuned. These, like, what do you do for exercise? Well, by the time you get to 14,000, you're strong. It doesn't matter what you've done. You're an animal, you're a beast hauling these sleds and stuff. It just help it get tough. And then this is like the next level. How much can you put on your back and do this? And by then your gyros have kind of straightened out and basically figure out what's happening, but pretty much keeping an eye on each other. 17,000. Here's one of those 30-year-old slides. I'm going to clean these up before the cruise ship because those aren't birds. That's grit. But see, we're dug in pretty well there, like really well at 17,000. 17,000. You see, this has turned into quite a community. And I went through one incident where all of our tents blew down in a horrible storm here. And someone said the Spaniards had a cave 100 feet down that way. So guides got out with shovels, digging into the snow, and sure enough, found the snow cave that the Spaniards had abandoned like 2 years maybe before, because the roof was sunken in. There's hair on the roof and old wax candles in the alcoves. And we moved our whole team into this snow hole that I'm sure we weren't the last ones to move in there. But all of our tents blew down. That was us. We're guides, and that, it's all I don't know what I'm doing up there. I know where I am and how to survive, but I can't anticipate what's coming up. None of us really could. Here's the snow hole, and, which is the safest place to be on a mountain like this is the snow hole. Here comes storm coming in, more snow hole stuff. This is when the tents all blew down, and then the stove stopped working, and this is my first experience with the mountain. The stoves blew out. We didn't summit. Then the clients were like, "Oh man, this is just too much. We're happy. Let's get the hell out of here." And you leave it up to them, basically. If there's a retreat involved, you kind of leave it up to the team to decide we've had enough, rather than the guides saying, we've had enough, we're out of here. It's kind of up to them. So you just let them suffer and be punished to the point where they just go, I can't take it. And that's cool. I was happy to get out of there. This is the rescue gully from 17,000. And if someone's injured up that high, there's a shortcut down to 14,000 down this. And I've been there through a number of cases where people have been lowered down that. And it is a pretty cool shortcut too. It's direct. The one expedition, the guy we were with skied the rescue gully, and that was pretty cool. So here now, 17,000 is the left shoulder of the mountain on the left side, and the whole summit day is from there to the top on the right. And we're just barely around the corner. And what's called the football field, I'll show you pictures of that, is that last stretch between the two summit rocks is the football field. And that's 19,000 something, over 19,000. But that last day is pretty exciting. So here you see 17,000, the camp is above his head to the left, a shoulder with a bunch of dots on it. That's the camp. And this is the traverse that gets people. And I've been up there a number of times when you do not want to trip over your crampons there. And this, like coming around this blind corner, is the spookiest part of that whole thing. And, so here you are looking at that from 17,000. And most people slip or perish just beyond the top guy is where you would trip and fall 1,000 feet. So that's pretty creepy area, and that's an eye opener too, because our patrons can look up and go, "Whoa, that's looking pretty spooky." And he's coming around that corner again with 17,000 on the lower right. To me, this is probably that and the above Washburn Boulder. That's probably the most perilous part of this mountain where you could fall and hurt yourself. The rest of the time, you could simply freeze to death or cerebral, your eyes you go blind and that stuff. But you're not going to fall. Here's that traverse again. And right up where those top guys are is where people tend to, make a wrong move, and away they go. Because again, you're not belaying. A couple of cases we usually carry pickets with clients. If they're looking wobbly, you can jam a picket in and actually belay up this area. Oop. This is 18,200. The top of the traverse. And this is one camp we had. We traversed the mountain, went down and out the other way. And so summited from this camp. But that, talk about windy as hell. This place could be terrifying. And luckily we weren't hit with a bad storm. So this is heading toward 19,000 feet. And the football field, where you're going up to that shoulder, you can see the trail vaguely on the right side of the shoulder. And then the summit is on the left. So you're looking up at that. And this is looking from that shoulder down at the football field. You've come up and over that bump. And this is where you talk about cerebral edema, where suddenly someone goes, I can't see. Is anything else wrong? No, I'm fine, but I can't see. Like, oh my God, here we go. Or like, I can't walk. It just hits you. Al knows how that works. And when someone just drops, you take them down 500 feet, boy, you pop right out of it. And you can. And but that kind of thing happens, and or else you just. I mean, there's a horror story of this young woman. It was a graduation present by her parents, 19 years old or something, to climb the mountain, who died in the guy's arms right up here because she just collapsed. And that was a horror story that kind of kicked us into gear, like, oh man, what are the odds of something like that happening? It really wasn't the guide's fault, but she just died in his arms. The rest of the team was sent down with an assistant who he tripped, somebody tripped, dragged him down. Maybe there was another death or something. And the whole expedition got massacred. And you talk about a guy being raked over the coals by the, I mean, everybody, the courts, the parents flew over her body in a few days. She's up there, and it was horrible. That's where this can happen. And usually I would say, I don't know what I'm doing either. If I start to wander, because I'm the leader up in front, yank the rope and pull me back, get me on line, because I'm just staggering along at that point. And because I'm not in control, I'm just standing. And so everybody's aware, and they're really keyed in too. Like, everybody's really on it. So here's looking from that point to the summit. And, you think you're there, and then you look up there and, oh my God, you're really, worn out. And if bad weather's coming in at this point, you wonder if another hour or two could make the difference. Here's from that point, looking at where I just took the picture from on the lower left, the last summit ridge. And we're 3,000 feet above 4 acre. That peak in the distance is, 3,000 feet below us. Or what is 4 acre? 17 something, whatever that is. So you're really up in the air. The last summit, right to the summit. And then summit shots. This was in 1980, my first ascent. And it was trial by fire. I hadn't climbed the mountain yet. I'd been on it, but we got massacred at 17,000. So there's one client, and Gary, the owner of Mountain Trips, hey, there's this one guy who wants to climb the mountain. So I went up there with this one guy, and we summited somehow, but nobody else was on the mountain on that trip. It was devoid of people in May, and he and I somehow summited together, and that's another whole story, like a pretty epic. Summit shots. Nice day on the top. Nice day on the top.
How many times did you summit?
I lost track, 10, and then something, I don't know. I know we didn't summit on 2 trips, and then, or actually 3. The first one was a disaster, and then there are 2 more that I did. So probably 14, 15 times. It seemed like that after 10, it made no difference. And even the first and the last are the ones that count. Everything in between is pure luck. Another summit shot.
Seems
Oh,
like
here's-
here's a great weather trip. I mean, it seems like most of at least all your slides are great weather. Maybe you didn't take any when.
It's wonderful. Come along, bring your shorts. No, this is the Denali summit thing. The next year, I climbed this thing, and that sign was still on the summit. It wasn't like some outrageous, threw it over the edge. It was like this pictures beside the Denali summit sign. Pretty cool. Another summit shot. Now, these are all beautiful. We don't have storm days on the summit generally anyway. This is my favorite. Now, these guys, these are the only 2 guys on our trip. And it's, I'm going to strip down. We're going to strip down. We're on the summit of Denali. So I didn't take my pants off. Okay, you can strip down and we'll get you like that. And that's as far as a guide. You don't want to be seen up there barefoot, as a guide. So, and he said, boy, Patagonia is going to eat this one up. And wow, the baggy shorts. And Patagonia didn't take it because it was just too reckless. We don't want people seeing that. And so there'll be a young guy up there in shorts, and they'll freeze to death. And then who's to be blamed for that? But that was cool. This is one of the neatest summits I ever had with these guys. All right. The meat grinder. Let's save this kind of that was just getting to the top. This is the stuff that I look back and I get terrified. The last thing you want to do is fall into a crevasse like that, because you can see the edges are leaning. If you fall in, the rope cuts into the side. So you're looking up at a wall or a roof of snow. You don't just go up over the edge. So it's sawing into the side, and you're hanging under it. The sled's hanging off of you. All your friends are out of contact, and it's bottomless. And how do you get out of something like that? And when I look back on close calls, whatever those are, this is the most terrifying. Avalanches are one thing, freezing is one thing, but this kind of thing it's merciless and terrifying. And there've been more crevasse incidences that are horrible. And how do you get around it? You walk around, and boy, if you plunge through, and that's what all that gear is for. In theory, you fall in there, you're out of contact, you're on your own. You've got to, they'll drop a rope to you and you get your sled off your back because you're being hauled down by 50 pounds of stuff. And then you're all tangled up. You're never ready to just clip on and go. You've got to sort all this stuff out. But this is hideous. And kind of weaving your way through crevasse fields is you learn that pretty quick, but it's still, you get pretty good at like where you can go and not go, but still you just never know. You approach something like this and like, where do you go? And you can see the end on the horizon below the far peaks, and I think we went pretty much straight up where he's looking, like you kind of weave your way, find that route. And this is lower on the mountain where these aren't like frozen snow so much, it's soft, so you could just plunge through. This is an incident, probably the worst one I experienced. We're just walking around eating lunch. It's a camp right behind me. And these guys come, 2 on skis and 1 on snowshoes. The guy on snowshoes you see there's no crevasse or anything. Plunged through, went down at least 40 feet with his sled. And so we all, of course, jumped on and trying to get this guy out. And here he is, finally yanking him out. I'll bet he spent 45 minutes down there. And every time someone would move up top, he's being pelted with snow. I mean, just horrible time. And he was basically hauled out. He didn't put the Jumars on it all and do that. But this guy, finally reaching the surface, and he's out here. He hit his nose on the opposite wall and broke his nose back, so he's covered in blood, and he doesn't know how badly he's hurt. When you do that, you just look at yourself, oh my God, it wasn't life-threatening, that part of it. But was the cool thing, there was a women's expedition right here. We were eating lunch, and they were headed up the mountain. And so they were all there too. And we hauled this guy out, and he's real hypothermic, right on the edge of coherency. The women all stretched down, stripped down to their long underwear, stripped him down, went into the tent. It was like Nanook of the North, and just embraced this guy who was almost out of it. And it was like we kind of hung out for a little bit, and the women got a kick out of that. And he just kind of woke up and like, what the hell happened? And so it was one of those sort of magical endings. I mean, it's so fortunate. I wouldn't have gotten in there with that guy. To avalanches. Most climbers kill themselves, I think. Mountains don't kill people, they kill themselves for being in the wrong spot. Like a crevasse, you're forgiven because you kind of have to be there, but who should have been there anyway? So maybe you did kill yourself in the end. It's not predictable. This getting caught in avalanches is terrifying. These things are so big that this is an area where a complete camp disappeared of Japanese climbers before I was there. It was like this famous, that's like a 10,000 foot avalanche, and buried him, never found, just in the wrong spot, and pretty horrifying. Here's us, we're a half a mile from this thing in this case, and sleeping without tents. We're this night trudge. So here comes another one. And she's kind of hanging off to the left there too. And these come from up high. You talk about avalanche safety and judging snow and stuff. You're on a slope that's 6,000 feet. You dig a hole, you test the conditions where you are, but you've got 4,000 feet above you where the conditions are different. So it doesn't matter where you are. It's like what could come down on top of you. And you might be safe in your spot, but who knows what's going on up there. But this guy, like this comes down, we're a half a mile from this thing, and it sounded like house-sized blocks just flying down the mountain, and like, oh my God, like huge chunks, and try to get blasted by this. And then of course it's still like half a mile away, but it sounds like it's, you're ready to be buried alive. Pretty cool stuff. Ravens. This is the other, this can end an expedition right here. And I mean, we've fallen prey to this. You don't bury your stuff. The ravens follow you up the mountain. They're not dumb. They know where the food is. And you bury your stuff, think it's safe. And from a mile away, you can see this like, oh God, the ravens have been there, eat everything, dig right down. They've dug 4-foot tunnels to get at haul bags, that kind of thing, and just chew up everything in there. That's sad. I mean, it won't stop the trip, but all of your goodies are gone. But I'd live on oatmeal the rest of your journey. Route finding. We actually watched these guys, like, because from where they were, you couldn't see what was going on. So where to stop, and they'll just walk off over an edge. You know, that's kind of, all this stuff is, I wouldn't say typical, but it's not uncommon. And the next thing you see is they go over the edge and then they're way down there somewhere. Storms, you know, knowing when and how to dig in. This is a storm at 18,000 feet at 2 a.m., like pretty radical. And no tents blew down, but pitching a camp under these conditions is what we did here. When they're in the middle of this thing and they got to pull these tents out, and they're like sails, and everybody pitches in to pitch one tent at a time and get it staked out. And in this case, don't need to get into it, but one guy had bad frostbite and we're headed out of the mountain. Okay, we frostbite. This guy being sledded out, and my policy, the Park Service required that anybody that's guiding on the mountain has to assist in an emergency. That's just what we do. You can't go, nah, it's, you know, let them deal with it. You have to take part. So this guy comes dragging by. There's another one. And I'm a guide, and they look at, hey, check this guy's foot out. And they pitch a tent. This guy climbs in, and you take his boots off, and they go, oh my God, or his booties and big purple toes. And my policy was, I'm not going to look at this guy unless my clients can look at him too. They've got to come in and see this, because this is where we're going. And the guy, whoever it was, I always say, okay, let him in. And like my people to come in and look at this guy's toes, and oh my God, you know, the first, you know, confronting horror, like what can happen? What happened? Then you go into what happened. I put an extra pair of socks on summit day, and that's all it took. Just squishing more blood out of your feet, be paranoid, and you've been fine up until then, and then there you are. You get on top and you can't feel your toes. And the only time I was frostbite was sort of seriously, my nose is still, I had a client at 19,000 feet, the wind's blowing, his face mask was coming off. So I take off my face mask, do his, and I look at myself that night, it's white. So damaging myself, saving this guy. And he didn't even tip me for that. You know, that was horrible. So these guys being dragged out. There's some purple toes. And this guy will probably lose the toenails, I'm sure, and probably the end is going to peel pretty darn good in the end, but he's not going to lose digits. But one of these things too, you take your boots off. They see this because the victim doesn't want to look at the injuries as much as the other people do. I don't want to look. He knows it's numb and, you know, pretty horrible, but kind of, so we get the better view. It's a Korean climber coming off the mountain, and someone had perished on his team, and we're the first people to meet him coming off the fixed lines. And this guy was just pretty incoherent. And I mentioned, this is like, we're one big family up there. It's not like you might be up there with a lot of people. When a storm hits, you're alone. That tent may be 100 yards away, the other camp, but you're not dealing with them, dealing with yourselves, but you're checking on each other all the time. And that's what's I think the coolest aspect is you know everybody, because you're all going up at the same rate. So you're all kind of coming down at the same rate. And it's pretty darn cool. Like the parties in Talkeetna afterwards and that kind of thing, or, you know, could be legendary. This is a fellow that came out that there's Gary on the left and all of us greeting this fellow that lost his team basically. And I won't get into that incident particularly, but it involved that young girl kind of. And this guy, one of the best climbers in the world. And, you know, it's a roll of the dice. We hunkered down that night and talked about, do we want to do this? How long do we want to keep doing this? Because none of us have lost clients yet in our immediate group. And this was one of the first things where this guy, it was serious. And I think within 4 years, we'd all kind of bailed on, you know, we've hauled our 500 people up there and to hell with it. We're out of here. And But that was serious. I mean, that kind of thing hits home, and and that was one of those random, I can't see, it really wasn't a fall or anything. Pretty hideous. This is the descent. And oh, I'm still online. All right. Oh, this is swank. Look at that. The beaver dams, like we've gone down, I've gone off of the mountain by foot twice, once on the south and once on the north. This is the south side, and wading through beaver dams, and you're carrying skis and all this stuff, and you use those as long as you can to get into this brush, and then wading beaver dams. There's wading streams, and it's kind of perilous with CBs. Like nobody knows where you really are. They know that you're headed out, and I mean, this doesn't look bad, but you get knee deep in water and you trip and you just barrel roll down the creek. This is with an Australian guy that he kept talking about, I don't like beer. He doesn't like bears, he was saying. What do you mean you don't like beer? And he's terrified of the bears, which is logical. Bugs. This could be hard. It's legend says, and the clients like this, if you stripped a guy bare, like the death penalty, strip a bear, turn him loose up north, and it'll be sucked dry in 2 days. The mosquitoes will just suck you dry. And that, and probably somewhat true, but when you're up there getting sucked dry by mosquitoes, you believe it. Like if you were naked standing there, I don't know what you would do, go nuts. Immerse yourself in water up to your nose, or I don't know if you'd escape. So that's kind of cool. CBs trying to make contact. See, I don't even have my boots on there because the feet this was before trail shoes. I don't know why, but we never carried trail shoes up and over the mountain, but it saved us a lot of grief. Here you go. This is at the end of 4 days walking out, trench foot. And this guy's, all of us, we took our boots off and the feet just do that. And there's no way you're getting those feet back into boots. No way. It's like needles. You're walking on razor blades, like pretty darn spooky stuff. And like Reinhold Mester said in the old days, if you can't walk, you die. I mean, that was his back in the 80s was, like you can't walk, you got to walk. This was where the bus was picking up us up at Wonder Lake, and the tourists on the bus saw this, almost puked. It was one of those, nothing horrible. It's not reality TV. This is the real thing. So trench foot is pretty hideous. And here we go. I like to end the show with a good idea. This is really good. And if you have kids running around, especially, and then here's a bad idea. And this kid, this is in Biak in Indonesia, he would husk coconuts with his teeth. And I couldn't cut through that with a knife. And he's ripping the stuff off the coconut. Unbelievable. We think we're tough. And that's it. Have we ended that? See you later. That was awesome. Oh, you've been wonderful. Am I still talking to the outer world, the netherworld? Hey, out there. Thanks. That was a blast. Come to Haines someday. We'll feed you fish. Seriously. Give me a day's warning. That was. How long did that take?
An hour and 10 minutes.
An hour and 10 minutes, yes.
Okay, so you can,
They might do that. The cruise ship, when they. No, we get to ask the show.
yes, you can ask questions and you can talk into there. if
Am
you
I still
want.
talking? Am I still online? Thank you for coming. You've been
Did you
wonderful.
answer all the chat questions?
Oh, any questions in the audience? I've got all my fingers and toes.
Did you see,
Stop sharing the screen.
Steve Gall in one of those pictures?
See,
Pulling the victim in the sled, was that Steve?
his name was Steve. The young guy with the yellow boots pulling the guy in the yellow booties. Steve, I think was
Steve
his.
was the lead guy for Fantasy Ridge.
Right, exactly. Well, how do you know that? I mean,
'Cause
that's,
I did a Fantasy Ridge trip.
oh,
We
excellent.
did the first ascent of the Thunder Ridge.
So there was a recognition here of the guy being pulled on a sled in the audience, knew that guy. That's pretty radical. Really? I mean, that is,
Yeah.
we had a
Kinda
good
take
time
a girl
together.
down on our
Thanks,
trip.
Sharon. Oh, great. Wow, thanks. Washington.
Ariane
Oh,
Giopolino.
huh.
Okay.
Was the girl.
So we don't have any questions
Oh, thank you.
at this point.
Look me up, email me.
I was awesome, John.
Is that Bill?
Yeah. And just to clarify, I do know what a willow wand is. We use them on the Mendenhall. I was having you tell the other non-climbers.
Everest. Yeah, I've had enough of high altitude. You're not getting me up there. Well, thanks for the link to it.
I'm not sure why we can't hear him better.
What I would recommend, and I've always done this, is man, if you want to get involved with the high altitude, introducing yourself to high altitude climbing, it doesn't matter if this is the gravy train or the cattle prodding gravy train. Do it anyway, because this is the best introduction to doing something like that, because you are surrounded by people, you see you see happiness, all that's there. And if you can pull Denali off, you're good for any other mountain in the United States. Well, I shouldn't say there's mountains up there that maybe you're not good for, but as far as the altitude and I highly recommend it. You know, definitely a really cool experience because it's so educational, and you figure out then people figure out if they want to continue on or not. A lot of these clients they're crossing the Sahara on camels next year. They aren't climbers. They're trophy hunters. That doesn't mean they're evil or anything, but it's just and if you want good gear in the end, we found, man, you treat these people well, they just hand you parkas. I'm done with this, you know, so the reward is, a lot of it's in equipment, you know, it can
be interesting. I'm sorry. Oh, I was just thinking about the Rangers, like Roger Robinson.
the Roger Robinson, he's still there. You know,
I know.
Roger is, yeah.
I'd be very interested in this particular show.
No, and also there's the sugar daddy aspect. On all these trips, you want to be really nice you are being really nice to people. One of these people, what you're always hoping for, is the one guy on an expedition that maybe is pretty well to do and he's adventuring the world. And he called, in this case, he called me, I'm in Jakarta. We're going to go in and do this peak. Can you be here? And this is a guy that I guided on the mountain because he liked me. And there were actually 3 sugar daddies in my life, and they're all met on the mountain. And then that's when I gave the mountain up, and I went international with these 3 people, and that was fine. And I never paid to go around the world; it was always on this other guy's ticket. And also, I've always maintained I don't want to guide anything I haven't climbed before, because I'm a guide. And so my deal with them is, you get me to the mountain, I'll get you to the top. I don't hail taxis in Jakarta. That's not my job. But what do I end up doing? Hailing taxis in Jakarta. And but they got me all over the world, these guys, and they're overlapping. You know, one guy's into the 7 summits, one guy's into skiing obscure peaks and stuff. And that's kind of how it ended. And also those guys got my wife around the world. I can't go to Nepal without my wife. Bring her, you know, that kind of thing. Like, oh, okay, I'm not going to Africa without my wife. Bring her along. That kind of thing is the sweetest situation. And you know, even though one of the sugar daddies didn't pay me, it was a free trip. Everything's free. The other guy, cash on the barrelhead. So, you know, it doesn't matter if you leave Haynes to Haynes is free. I'm not spending anything. Time. That's what it's all about. No written, nothing's on paper either. Nothing. This guy could die in my arms. I could leave him in the jungles of Irian Jaya, and no attorneys are going to jump on me. I mean, that's pretty critical too. I don't know what I'm doing. You know, I'm there with these people, and I know what I'm above timberline, but I'm not bushwhacking through jungles full of spiders the size of dinner plates. Are you kidding me? I'm terrified, and I'm supposed to be guiding these guys. Nah, it doesn't work that way. But that's kind of how it ended. And then the sugar daddies ended their thing. Like the Japanese guy, he did 10 big adventures. Yoshi came here. We skied from Skagway to Juneau. That was one of the trips. And he loved it here. He's probably going to come back. But there were these 10 big adventures, and we did those. And then he did his 10 adventures, and it got me art shows in Japan. I was all over the place, in Mongolia and weird things. But it ended, and that was kind of it. And we're still communicating, but there's no more adventures with Yoshi, where Al died, which is really sad. He was going to be the oldest guy to climb Everest. And we went all over the 7 summits and stuff. And each trip he would get kind of lower and lower on the mountain. And it got kind of futile where, okay. And I think realistically, I don't want to get into Al, wonderful guy. And we had the team called the Goon Squad. That was our call name on the mountain. We were the Goon Squad every year. And so we became the Goon Squad. And Al's guys were, have you seen K2, the old horrible movie K2, where the rich guy kind of brings all of his young bucks into the mountain? He sits in the lounge chair and finances their climbing. That concept, but Al wanted to do the climbing. He wanted to get to all these summits. So he surrounded himself with all of us guides. We picked up, we had a river runner, the Wrangler, like all of us professional guides, and took us all around the world doing that. And he perished. He was going to be the oldest guy to climb Everest, but then some guy the year before that was the oldest. And so Al kind of, and I think is realistic, maybe his wife pulled the plug on it. It was just too much because he's paying millions of dollars to get us to these places. And you know, it was all fun until the Everest thing kind of ended it. So then I went to Mongolia and ate sheep with the Japanese while they were trying Everest, and they got the shit kicked out of them. They didn't get anywhere. The attempt that he did make, the last one. And I was having a great time with this other guy, some obscure place. But that sugar daddy concept, and it's not, you know, it's not unreal. I mean, we all kind of, it's like the meat grinder term. I mean, you have, climbers can be pretty sarcastic sometimes, that dark humor and all of that. But I mean, if you grew up in Yosemite rock climbing, you're used to people falling off cliffs. You know, I mean, it's like, it's just a different way to end your life, I guess. I'd really rather fall off a rock cliff than die in a crevasse. If you had to do it one way or the other, man, that crevasse thing gives me the creeps. And, you know, I think back on Close Calls, I think the cruise ship calls me a survivor on that show, the survivor. Well, any person that's done, you know, adventure sports or anything, anybody that survived 2 close calls is a survivor in my mind. It's that close call that makes you, because that one could have gotten you, but it didn't. So it was a close call. And so the meat grinder thing is definitely the dark humor with the meat's here and the grinder's running. That was like May. Oh boy, here we go. And who's going to make it? Who isn't?
Hey, John, what I wanted to say too is photography is fantastic.
Out of 10, I mean, I've still got some sorting to do, but like every trip out of all, whatever trips those were, I took 10 rolls of slides. So you got like, you know, 500 pictures of 14,000 feet and all this stuff going on. And I've still got sifting to do. This was like, oh my God, put something kind of coherent together that makes sense. Cause I'm going to be like, my audience is going to be in polo shirts and hush puppies. I mean, that's who looking at me on this cruise ship. These aren't climbers or anything. They're, you know, in thongs. And so in the cruise ship, it's like, I said, what do you want? Is it kick ass is one term. Kick ass, man. We want to wake these people up. So, and then the second show is Bushwhacks from Hell in the Upper Lynn Canal. That's the second presentation I'll be doing. And there's a lot of looking down on Haynes in that. And I've probably suffered more in Haynes bushwhacking than on any mountain. I mean, where I'm with a guy that passed out, you know, in brush, like just how much can a human take? I found that humans are only willing to pay for so much pain. And the Overland to Skagway we did, this was in the 80s. The first time we did the Macho Man. You know, Rustaback did that in 48 hours. He's in Klukwan. I mean, how the hell did he do that? It took us 10 days. And the 2 people I was with guiding broke into tears. It was too much. You're wading down rivers up to your chest and alders with packs on. And I mean, horrible rain for days on end. And just, they didn't pay for that. This was too much. And but when you get to Skagway, that was great, you know, like great adventure if you survive it. But when grown, well, I'm going to try and put that one together. And Dana Van Berg, a lot of you know the people that Gordon Sandy was one of those guys. Kent Greentree was one of those guys. Rob Goldberg, wasn't with us on any of those. We've climbed together, but not the. Well, Rob and I bushwhacked. Well, a lot of everybody bushwhacks around here. And that's kind of, then I guess the theme is you bushwhack, if you can make it above the brush, you're in paradise. You're in Heidi, you know, this is the Sound of Music, you're above all that stuff. But that's why nothing's climbed around here. These people in the Mendenhalls and that, like you get this team from Colorado comes in, they've got 10 days, they want to climb this big route. They fly in, it rains for 8 days. And then they're out of there. And we're sitting there with 6 weeks with an airdrop every week, just waiting for the weather. out of 6 weeks, we get 2 weeks of real climbing in. We do all of our approaches in the storm, because why waste, good weather approaching anything? There's kind of a method to doing anything like that. But I don't know, it's like, I survived, I got out, these guys retired just in time, and man, I'm glad. I'd had enough. It wasn't worth the money. And plus one died and the other one gave it up. So it was good. If he would have kept going, I could be out there now, but there's a point where, I've done enough of that. Now I'm painting it. I've got so much material to paint. So if I'm painting Argentina or if I'm painting Bolivia, I've got thousands of these pictures that are, are just, I've looked at once, incredible slides of all this reference materials. I don't need to go anywhere to do
What was
that.
your favorite film? Kodachrome 64 or?
Probably,
slide film?
probably 64 was good. 125 was more. Then we get into Fujifilm. This is ancient technology, camera. This cruise ship, I said, you want to do a slideshow? Sure, I'll do a slideshow. Do you have projectors? What's a projector? I got that from the cruise ship. What's a projector? Wow, what are you guys talking about? It's like, what's a projector? Well, okay, that's cut and dried. So this is invaluable. This insanity that I'm doing here is it's crazy, But I'm glad I'm figuring this one out because everything's PowerPoint now. And
Well, I'm going to cut John off because it's
oh,
time
am I
for,
still on air?
you are, because
No.
it's,
Oh, thank you, everyone.
it's time. We'd love to hear more, but it is time for the library to
Any
close.
discrepancies, email me and I'll tell me what went wrong.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Wow. So I was listening to on all of that.